Yo, have you heard of LinkedIn Learning? If you haven't, LinkedIn Learning is an American massive open online course provider. It provides video courses taught by industry experts in a variety of subjects. Now, why am I sharing this? I'm sharing this because Living Corporate is in partnership with LinkedIn Learning to provide diversity, equity, and inclusion courses. Listen, if you're trying to be a better ally, you want to understand better diversity, equity, inclusion strategies, or you just want to learn how to be a better leader, you got to check out the courses on LinkedIn Learning. So check it out. You can do it one of two ways. You can click the link in the show notes, or you go to LinkedIn Learning and you search Living Corporate. Again, link in the show notes, or go to LinkedIn Learning and search Living Corporate. I'll see you over there.
Welcome back to the break room. This is, we are on the Living Corporate Network. We are all about Black mental health at work, and we are glad that you are joining us for this week's installment of Some Awesome Shit. And so, my name is Dr. Brian Dixon. I am a child, adolescent, and adult psychiatrist in Texas, where I work with lots of families and lots of people to help them live their best lives and reintegrate mental health into their modern lifestyle. And so, joining me is the most awesomest panelist ever. And so, I'm going to kick it over to Dr. Bamishigbin.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Brian. Hi, everybody. My name is Dr. Olajide Bamishigbin. I'm a health psychologist, and I work in the field of health equity, and I have 2 kids and a beautiful wife. So I'm kicking it over to Dr. Nikki.
Hello, and I am Dr. Nikki, a PsyPat certified or credentialed, not certification. Let me get the words right before they come get me. A PsyPat credentialed licensed psychologist in the state of Texas, and I work with Black women and couples on relational and sexual wellness. And I also have a side of the house that does racial equity consultation and training with small to mid-sized organizations. And awesome. I'm happy to be back with my guys.
Yay!
Missed you.
Always a pleasure.
It really is.
Yeah, and so our specialty, especially within the Living Corporate Network, which you should definitely check out because there's, a whole bunch of good shit that's worth listening to. Our specialty is being Black and Blackness in the mental health space at work. So wherever that work is, academia, the corporate space, your house, you name it. And so we're always hoping that you leave our presence having learned something, hopefully about yourself and the people around you. And so we always start off our podcast with a little bit of the tea. So some of the stuff that's been going on. So I think Dr. Jide has our tea today, right?
That's me. I do have the tea for today.
Okay.
All right. So relatively recently, Amazon has formed their first union in New York. So workers at Amazon in New York have formed the first union. And it was led by what I think many would consider like an unlikely figure, like a man who like wears all red and Air Maxes. His name is Chris Smalls, wears chains, and he was fired from Amazon because they said he broke whatever rules. And he said, okay, that's great. And he decided to not give up and worked to make sure that Amazon had their first union. So 5,000 people work through this Amazon, and now they're going to have a union where hopefully they'll be protected. So I love this. What the top Amazon lawyer said about Chris Smalls. Mm-hmm. He's not smart or articulate.
Mm-hmm.
And he showed them. And I just think
I love it. I love a good underdog story.
It shows the power of collectivism and working together, because now guess what? They can't make y'all pee in bottles no more. People have a right to use the stuff that actually happens at Amazon.
Yes. Oh yes.
Now
listen.
Now
I'm addicted to my Amazon. So I tried to quit them. I really did. When I started learning about the horrible work conditions, and then I even think about the impact on the environment, I tried to quit them. But listen, that Jeff Bezos got the best crack out there. I can click on this app on my phone and have shoes here tomorrow.
Yep.
It's unbeatable.
Yep.
But I'm also very, very happy for the win. What I love about it is our society has developed such that there is a high expectation that you need an advanced degree to be considered a quote unquote success. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of capitalism and a lot of anti-Blackness sort of wrapped into that idea that we don't unpack and talk about. And I love that this is the dude that did the damn thing, that doesn't look like the picture of what we call quote unquote success, that isn't quote unquote palatable, that isn't quote unquote polished or professional, but he got your ass.
Mhm.
He got you.
So
And I love it.
I think I was listening to NPR and they did an interview with this guy, and he basically, I think he had a Suburban or some kind of SUV, and he was toting around like a grill and food and all sorts of stuff. And he would just go out and support the workers at Amazon. Like when they would come out, he would have food ready for them. He would talk to them about collective bargaining and the importance of staying as a group, which is super hard in a society like ours.
Amazon had him arrested for trespassing one of those days when he brought food. Yeah. So it's an evil organization.
Grassroots organizing still works. Like someone who can speak to the people is still a tried and true tactic and strategy of liberation. And so good for y'all. And I hope he is training other folks to do what he did. Like,
that's right.
Get your money together.
So to tie this back to our previous podcast, because of course, if you haven't listened to our other podcasts, please do so. You can find them on social media, on the Living Corporate website. But I can only imagine that this level of Black excellence is a lot for him. And so I do worry about, I mean, that's a lot. Like he was a one-man show for the longest time. And so I would love to know how burned out he is with all this stuff. I know he got the win, but that's a lot, y'all.
Yeah.
Wishing
But we
him
all
wellness.
do a lot. Like, isn't that part of the Black story? Like, we all do a lot.
Why can't we be mediocre?
We can't. I dare you. Try it.
I dare you. I dare you.
I dare you to be mediocre. Let me see you do it. So I think that's a really wonderful way for moving into today's topic, which is very simply being Black while at work. And we wanted to just talk about the reality that there are lots of spaces and industries in which you may be the one or one of a very small handful of other Black folks. I know I have worked in academic institutions where let me just be straight up. In my first tenure track position at the University at Albany, I was in the School of Education, and I was one of two other Black folks in the entire School of Education. And I didn't meet the other Black professor until I was literally packing up my office. And I was like, it's too late, brother. Like, where were you 23 months ago? I lasted 2 years there. And so we've talked a great deal here, and we'll probably continue to talk about, right, experiencing microaggressions in the workplace, experiencing marginalization in the workplace, experiencing being devalued in the workplace, right, as part of, I think, a normative Black professional experience. However, it hit different, as they say, when you're the only one, right? So when there's a group of folks, you can go to the break room. You see what I did there? Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. You can go to the break room or have lunch with friends or text, right, about a shared experience, right? You're having a shared experience. And so while it doesn't offset the sort of difficulties and challenges of being a professional in a setting that's predominantly white, it helps moderate the experience a bit, right? But there are a lot of folks for which, if you get on a Zoom call, they're the one Black space in among all the tiles or on their floor. And I just thought it would be important for us to have a sort of a dedicated conversation to that additional isolation and for what that might be like in terms of psychological consequences when you are the one of only a handful.
Yeah, I would say in my experience, it's because so being a Black psychiatrist is rare. Being a Black child psychiatrist is even more rare. Being a Black male child psychiatrist is like a damn unicorn. Like it's yeah. And so, and especially in kind of the academic spaces or the private practice space. So I sit in both of those, and they're just not, we're not out there. And so it's really funny that we all came together in the break room and we've been doing this podcast for the last, 2 years now, year and a half, something like that, is because if I didn't have the break room, I know I would feel very uninformed. So I would be up in those academic spaces. I'm so used to being the only Black dude everywhere I go anywhere that I just kind of have dulled my senses. Like I'm just like, when I hear something or I see something that's a microaggression or a macroaggression, I just go, whatever. I can't solve all things for all people all the time. And so I just kind of dull myself to it. And so so to me, being Black at work in my space I would be very, very just detached. And so having a virtual break room to be in and podcast to listen to and interacting with y'all, it helps me feel way more connected. Even during those times when, I'm surrounded by Black folks at work, they are also disconnected. And so I get to teach them stuff that I hear from y'all, which is kind of fun because I'm like, oh, this is what it means to decenter whiteness. And they're like, oh shit, I didn't realize that that's what that was. Right. So yeah, I think that was my unique experience. I've never been transgressed at work, but as very much as I just protect myself and just kind of keep that barrier around me.
So I would frame it differently, Brian. Like as the outside looking in, I see that as a coping response to an onslaught of transgressions. Yeah. Like it is such that you don't have the mental energy to engage each of them. So as a coping mechanism, you have numbed to them as a protective factor.
So that's a great question. The way I see it, and this is where it gets real nuanced, y'all. So just kind of bear with me, which is there's no outward overt aggression. It's the absence of inclusion. So which I guess could be a transgression, but I don't know. I've never really interpreted it. I don't filter it that way just because I don't know, I guess who I am. In other words, I walk around campus. I don't feel bad at all. I don't feel like people aren't including me. It's that I feel like if I want to be included, I have to go out and get it. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, but I think white supremacy functions on multiple levels and in multiple ways, and it's not always overt. But that's why I continue to use the framing white supremacy, because to me, it reflects the supremacy of thought, of what's appropriate, what's the default, what's normative, and then everything else is seen as an exception to that. So I don't ever use the term supremacy to mean superior. I mean that it's dominant and it's everywhere. And so if you don't feel it with a particular sort of prickliness or harm, doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. I hear what you're saying, right? And like when I left Albany and went to U of H, that was how I categorized my experience. I went from an overtly racist experience to a benignly racist experience, but they were both racist experiences. And part of what created the benign racism I experienced at U of H was that there was more demographic diversity, a great deal more demographic diversity. And it was University of Houston is in Houston, which is one of the most ethnically diverse cities in the country, right? Compared to Albany, New York. When I was in Albany, New York, my grandmother was still alive. My grandmother was born in 1916, so her language is reflective of that. And I remember she asked me, she was like, baby, is it any other colored people at that school with you? And I said, ma'am, Granny, I gotta look in the mirror if I want to see another Black person. And she said, my God, how you do, baby? How you doing that? Like she was like, it hit her like my baby is up there by herself. And I think that is a common experience for many Black professionals, and certainly at certain levels of quote unquote success, where you are the only one. And I think that comes along with isolation, as well as a lot of responsibility, whether you want to have it or not.
Yep. Yeah.
So, Jide, what do you think?
I agree that it comes with a lot of responsibility. Like I'd say in my experience, that's what I felt. So prior to my current job, I spent 4.5 years as a professor, teaching class, and I taught classes on racial, ethnic, minority, mental health, and health disparities. So even I had to discuss topics of white supremacy and racism and classism and bigotry, right? But it always hit me that I may be the only black male teacher these people have ever had in their entire lives.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
In their entire, like, and I stopped and I said, have I ever had a black male teacher?
Mm-hmm.
I had one when I was in graduate school, and he also was my advisor before he left for another university, you know, but like, not really. Right. So there's a lot of responsibility that comes with being the only one, you know. I'll say also, I'm from Miami, black neighborhood. I did not realize how many white people there were until I moved to California. Like, I really was shook. Like, from the part of Miami I'm from, it's black people and Hispanic people, and we kick it, and that's it. Like, we don't really come across white people like that. And then I got to California, and I was like, oh my God, there's more of y'all than there is.
There really are a lot.
There
really are a lot.
So it's shocking.
Yeah.
It's shocking.
That's how I feel when I go to Austin, Texas. Especially when I leave Houston. And then when I go to Atlanta, I'm always like, oh, it's a lot of black people.
Yeah, right.
Because here in Houston, there's more Latino folks or Latine folks than there are black folks. We're out here, trust and believe, but the proportion, right? It's palpable. So I wonder if we could talk a little bit more about what are some of those psychological consequences, right?
Before that, so you asked a question right before, or I think Dr. Dixon asked a question right before we started that I want to answer really quickly. He said, is it possible for a black person to have psychological safety at the workplace, right? Yeah. And I kind of was about to say, yeah, but I was like, no. To me, the answer is no, just historically. And I'm talking even outside of a majority white workplace, even if you're a black person trying to do your own thing, right? Like, just historically, okay? You could be a black person trying to open a grocery store, and those white people will run you out of town. Okay, and kill all the black people who stayed. All right, just because you want to open your own grocery store for your own people, right? Like, there is a sound kind of like we was kings, like Hotep, but like there's a concerted effort. Like, it's a concerted effort to destroy the things that black people have, right? Like, you know, all the studies that show white people are for welfare until they find out black people get it. White people cared about COVID until they found out that black people die from it. Like,
yep, I agree. I 100% agree. I 100% agree.
Well, because I don't want to take the contrarian view, but I think there are ways for black people to cull out, to carve out psychological spaces wherever they are, be that if you run your own thing or whether you work for somebody. To me, even though I know racism is a systemic issue, I think that there are ways that black folks can make their own little enclaves within that system until we change the whole damn system. Because obviously that's what I want. Everybody wants that. But I don't, maybe it's just a me thing. I don't like the idea that, you know, I have this black person in this big system and they're exposed all the time and they are constantly, they're constantly under barrage, because to me, that just sounds sad. And so I want to believe that there are little ways that we can protect ourselves.
So that's why I wanted to shift to, right? Like, I don't think it's one or the other. I think we have to find ways to protect ourselves,
right?
Because it is all problematic. I believe even G-Day is old enough to remember this, but when the movie Boomerang came out,
I've seen Boomerang.
Boomerang. I've seen it too.
You were, you know it, but you weren't around. Like, so I was in high school, and there was a lot of conversation around. I'm
sorry. I was like Kevin Hart. I feel like, damn. I just like, damn. I'm sorry.
So genuine. Young whippersnapper, that's all right. But there was a lot, like, the press coverage around Boomerang was in part a critique of Eddie Murphy, saying he's created this all black workspace that's so unbelievable. Like, Hollywood was critiquing him for doing this unbelievable thing in Hollywood. Like, it was a whole thing. And I always go back to that black folks know that part of quote unquote professionalism is white supremacist. You know, there's a certain way you have to show up at work. This is why we have all of these Crown Acts having to be passed. This is why there's recent data that came out in 2021 that Black women with natural hair get less access to interviews for positions they're qualified for as Black women with relaxed hair as and then less so than Black women with relaxed hair, and even more less so. I know that's statistically inappropriate to phrase it that way, but y'all know what I'm trying to say conversationally, than white women, right? This is why we have these conversations, because there's certain things that are still novel about Blackness that is unallowable in the workspace. So you don't show up as your full, whole, and complete self. And as long as you are spending the vast majority of your adult life in spaces that disallow you from showing up as your full, whole, and complete self, you can't be healthy. You have to develop coping skills. I think a big part of Black liberation is naming all of the harm that is done to us and being unwilling to shy away from that. So not everybody can go work for themselves. Not everybody's going to work in a fictional corporation like in the movie Boomerang. My God, why can't I remember the name of the cosmetics companies? But
it wasn't Strong J. Oh, what was it?
Strong J was the model.
Okay.
But so that's not going to happen, right? And if it does happen, it's not happening in this lifetime. And so I want to talk about. So for one, I would like to sort of encourage folks to be more bold in taking up more space, right? Like, I think there's sometimes this reflexive relationship between individuals and the systems, so that if I know that I won't be accepted in a certain way, so then I don't show up in that way. So therefore the system never has to acclimate to me. So when I was early on in my career, I used to wear Ankara print, quote unquote, African style clothing all the time. I used to go to work with my head wrapped and like on cue. Oh, look at you today. Oh, wow. Oh, wow. I love those bold colors. Oh, wow. I love that. Oh. It was always a conversation. I'm just in regular clothes. It's just clothes. That's all that is. And so that was intentional on my part, right? So I think we have to think about ways to be intentionally bold and intentionally reclaim spaces, or reclaim the space for ourselves, and be unapologetic in that. And I think we also have to think about what are our other resources that we use intentionally to continue to maintain resilience, so that we don't sort of capitulate to the status quo. They got nothing, y'all. They just look at me.
Nah, I'm just no. And
I was reflecting on my own experiences, like as you were talking about, the hair and the print. I was just reflecting on like some bad experiences I had. So sorry, I was like in a whole other zone. I was like, damn, that really happened.
Yes, it does really happen. So I think that's why I want to like just affirm us in being more bold in doing that consistently, right? And knowing that sometimes it's going to come, knowing that it is going to come with some responsivity, right? You are stepping outside the norm, and the system will always remind you that you have stepped outside the norm.
Yep.
But you want to have your psychological reserves and your coping to help navigate that, but to do it intentionally, because I do think that that's how things begin to change. I don't know. So I was curious if there were other coping strategies that you all are thinking of. They are in deep thought. Y'all can't see all the video. They are really like, they are pondering, and they are in another space.
I think my first reaction is I'm a tattletale on you. Like whatever you did, I'm gonna tell on you. I'll tell you the experience that I had. I was in grad school, and I was driving up like 2 hours away to a conference, right, with fellow people in my cohort, because we're all going to the same conference. And I think it was like, 3 white women in the car, and, we were going up, and we went up, and I got to it's like a hotel conference center. I got there, and they saw me, and they were like, "Oh, are you the driver?" And I remember just being like,
"Come on now."
No, like, no, like I drove here, but I'm not the driver, So I told the manager at the place, I told my advisors, I told everybody else. I'm a firm believer in, if it's true, there should be no issue with somebody saying it. If it's true, You actually did ask me that dumbass question. So I'm going to tell everybody you asked me that.
Yeah.
And then they changed the policy after that, but whatever,
I mean, and I had a graduate school colleague that gave me this phrasing. She was like, I'm going to give them their racism back. I'm not going to hold on to them to that. And that really stuck with me. So when I would wear clothing or when I would speak up or when I would code switch in the workplace and people would respond, I would say, why is that shocking? Is something unusual about my clothes? Now you don't want to name the shit. Now you want to move on. Okay, well, let's all move on. Right. So I think that is also a coping mechanism, right? Not holding on to things, naming the thing. When you name it out loud, it exposes the racism inherent in it.
Yep.
And it immediately makes everybody uncomfortable. And so my suggestion is you as the Black person to get comfortable with their discomfort. Yeah. Don't save them.
So I guess and I know we'll pivot to the last nerve in just a second, Dr. Jide. So the way I handle it, so that the moral arc of the universe is long and bends towards justice, right? And so I always play the long game, and with that, I don't. I tend to kind of underreact in the moment, and so that's number one. And then the other thing is I'm a big believer. I read a quote about diplomacy, and diplomacy is the ability.
Brian, what's your sign?
I'm a Cancer. Yeah.
Really?
So yeah. So
what about you, Nikki? What about you, Dr. Nikki?
Cancer. I'm gonna blow the shit up and let's talk about it later. Kind of Cancer.
Oh, y'all are both Cancers. That's funny.
Yeah. So because and I don't know who said this, but it's diplomacy is the ability to tell a person to go to hell in such a way that they look forward to the trip, right? And so that's how I respond. So I may not respond in the moment, but I absolutely will plot and plan for your demise later on.
And no way is better or worse than any other way. You got to do what works best for you. Because some people are in positions where they can't say anything, and I don't want to. Don't go to your boss and say Jide told you to do this and then you get fired. Like that's not how I want this to go. We're in different situations, so I understand that.
Yeah.
Well,
but let me just say that one point.
Sure.
I think it's important to not make that blanket statement. I think it's important for everybody to be accountable for what they are willing to get fired for. Right? Like I reached the line in the sand for me where I was like, y'all gonna have to fire me because I'm not gonna do what you asked me to do. Right. And I think that's a perfectly acceptable approach to life. Right. There's gonna always be another job.
Always.
There's always another job. It's always. So just like, some people can't say something. Something about that phrasing, even though it's probably mature and accurate and responsible, has always just irritated me. Like even as a graduate student, I was like, I'll blow this shit up before I let y'all talk to me crazy, and said that out loud to people. People talk way more than they actually do. So
it's true.
I ain't got no long game, Brian.
Yeah. But it's a diaspora of thought, which is why the break room is so awesome. So we're super glad that y'all are joining us.
It is. If you have other strategies that you use or other questions, you can always email us at the break room living-corporate.
Wait,
huh?
The break room at living-corporate.com. Yep.
You tried. You gave it a good effort.
I'm never gonna remember it. It's too long. It's a copy and paste. But yes. Or feel free to tweet at us at the break room LC.
That's right. On Twitter. That's right.
Yep. That is correct. And so bringing our last nerve today, y'all, is Dr. Jide once again. Get it. So what's been on your mind?
All right. So we're going to talk about the fact that around 4,000 former and current Black employees at Tesla are suing Tesla and Elon Musk for racist treatment that they experienced. Okay. But just so you know, Elon Musk's father owned like a Zambian emerald mine. So this is literally who this person is in their path. So I just want you to know that. So I'm reading from this LA Times article. A single mother was excited to land a job at Tesla. About 3 years in, she was fired after complaining that Black workers were frequently called the N-word on the assembly line. A former refinery worker couldn't wait to get into green energy. energy. She said she soon found herself and other Black workers assigned to the most arduous task in a corner of the factory called the plantation. An Army veteran, he said he was fired after he complained that a boss called him and 2 Black coworkers monkeys. And people...
I got in a fight at United Artists Theaters in 1992 when that white boy tried to tell me on my good shift behind the concession stand that his teacher told him Black people have stubs where we used to have tails because we descended from monkeys. I got into a fight then. I would get into a fight today if I worked in that factory.
That is perfectly justified to fight.
What is happening when you got 4,000 people agreed on anything? You know it's problematic.
Wow.
And it's not just the treatment, it's that they complain and then they're retaliated against, you know? And, you know, Elon Musk, there are people who just constantly defend him. Like, he has so many people revere him as this entrepreneur and this thinker when he's really not. He's really like an immature 14-year-old. If you gave a 14-year-old power and money, you know,
what a whole
the worst 14-year-old on earth.
Yeah,
You
so
know?
he doesn't build anything. He tried he bought his way into Tesla, and then for whatever reason he has a real good marketing game apparently, because people like drink his bathwater and think that he is like the next coming of Jesus. And y'all, he is not it. He if you want a obviously he is the archetype of non-DEI and non-belonging, because shit rolls downhill. And so he hires people who obviously don't value those values either. And this is the kind of stuff you get. Golly.
That's disgusting.
It's disgusting. I hope
Can
they
you imagine
win.
being a whole grown person in 2022? Like, and somebody gonna call you that when you at work. I'm at work. I don't want to be here anyway. This is a job. I got to be here because I need money to live. And you think you're gonna talk to me like that?
And it's very indicative of how people in tech are treated just overall. Black people in tech are treated overall.
Yes.
So trust this is happening at many other places, but
They haven't filed that lawsuit yet.
Preach.
Right.
Well,
But maybe there's change in the air. We started with Chris Smalls. We ended up with 4,000 people at
Tesla.
At Tesla. People tired of taking shit.
Amen. And if y'all tired of taking shit and you want to voice your opinion and let us know on social media or in our email at thebreakroom@living-corporate.com. As always, we are super glad that y'all joined us. Make sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcast, because that's really important. And then Dr. Nikki, you said 5 stars?
Yes, 5 stars, 5 out of 5. Would recommend.
Absolutely. Share with
Please.
Be a friend, share with a friend, like all the things.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
Alrighty, y'all.
thanks so much, y'all. Have a
Bye.
great
It's been
night.
a joy. Peace.
Bye.